We are now recording. Welcome to Turn Your Research Project into a Formal Scientific Study. And this is specifically for remote viewers, psychics, sci enthusiasts without an advanced degree or budget, although everyone is welcome. And we certainly welcome those with a degree and with a budget. And Michelle, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, we're sponsored by the Applied Precognition Project, um, APP, and Marty Rosenblatt is the founder along with Chris Georges. Um, we actually have our conference coming up. We're really excited. We have a lot of different things going on this year. It's back in Las Vegas. We heard you, and a lot of people wanted it back in Vegas. We use ARV, and we predict the outcome of sporting events or financial things like that. And we are offering a super early bird discount that will expire November 30th. This is for our paid members, and we'd love you to become a member to take advantage of this price. It's $345 for the 4-day conference, and that's a savings of $180. So if you can sign up by November 30th, we would love it. And then right at the bottom is the website. So you can just register there, and there's even more information about who's speaking. So far we have Joe McMonagle, Dean Radin, and we're working to get Mr. Hal Putoff, and we have some others that we are working on. So we will be making final announcements in the coming weeks. I think that's good. If anyone has any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. And Michelle and I are webmasters, co-webmasters for the Applied Precognition Project. I've been doing projects with them for the past 7 years or so, and Michelle for the last few years. And really, they are essential to, let me just see if I can get back on my slide here, to this project, because there's so many incredible groups that are running all sorts of different informal research, so to speak, even if they're not calling it research. And that's really one of the main things that motivated me to put on this webinar today, because I'm seeing so much good work, and I'll go into that more. And it's really work that needs to get out to the rest of the world, because a lot of people think that there's not a whole lot going on in the field of remote viewing today, and that's really not true. It's just obviously not getting out there enough. And we have several members here today of the Applied Precognition Project, and even a few people today whose sessions I'm going to be sharing. So there's some prizes for a few attendees. Okay, so then I would like to introduce Michelle. And Michelle, you've been hearing her voice. She will be your communication specialist. So she's, as you've already noticed, she's been paying attention to the questions. You all have a control panel, and hopefully you can find it. So you can, you'll at least have to find your control panel to ask questions about the system, but she will be on standby. Where it says questions, you will be able to type in not just a question, but you could type in a comment, anything you want to say. We want this to be as communicative as possible, participatory as possible. And so whatever you want to share, Michelle may just take a note. She may interrupt me as I'm talking and let me know what your comment is, or share it with everybody else. She may respond directly. So we definitely welcome your communication, and you can be typing into that field the question box. Because this is GoToWebinar, it doesn't allow for everyone to type into the chat box like GoToMeeting does, but the question box serves in its place. We'll
And
also, oh,
another thing is we have a hand that you can raise a hand if you would prefer to actually speak yourself, and then we'll use that for you to speak if you want to ask your question. Sometimes it's too long to write or type or whatever, so you just raise a hand and then we'll call on you. So there's two methods to let us know you have something to
and
say.
we really do want to hear from you. The worst thing is feeling like we're just talking into a computer. So it really helps when you share. And I know so many of you have so much knowledge to share here. So Michelle and I have been working on various research projects for the last few years. We're currently the co-recipients of the Irva Iris War-Collier Award, and we're in the thick of our study right now, and that's going quite well with 12 viewers and 6 judges at the moment, completing 30 trials each. And Michelle is doing a great job running the project at the moment. She's also a hypnotherapist, a remote viewer, app member, and she'll be available after the webinar for any questions, or if there's anything you need as follow-up for information, you can always get in touch with her. And then most of you already know myself, and I can just go ahead and introduce myself here. I'm not going to say too much about myself, except I have a few books out on psychic development. I've been a practicing professional psychic for the last 20 years. I've been extremely involved in remote viewing for many years now, and I have been doing research informally for about 15 years, and then more formally for about 8 years or so. And I'm very, very passionate about this subject, and I'm glad to see so many of you are here today. In fact, a couple of days ago, I was thinking that maybe it was just going to be myself. And then when Michelle said she would join, I thought it would be the two of us. So I really couldn't believe my eyes when I saw we had 30 people registered for a topic about research. That's just fantastic. And whenever this is the first time I am leading a webinar like this, and so I always have to ask myself, maybe in the same way that you all are asking yourself, those of you who are new to research, what are my qualifications? Like, what right do I have to be here doing what I'm doing? And I can tell you, I'm not the most experienced researcher. There are others who could talk circles around me around these subjects. There is a lot I still don't know. And there is one thing I do know that my more experienced mentors may not. Two things. I know what amazing work is already being done. I know what capable, thoughtful, even brilliant people you all are. I'm your peer, not Ed Mays, not Dean Reagan's, but yours. But they did take my survey that I created yesterday. And I'm going to be sharing some of their responses because I think you'll find that encouraging for your own work. I'm a few steps ahead than a few people here in understanding how to do this work without a PhD and without a budget. I know it can be done. We are the next generation who has yet to understand our role in history. And history is happening right now. So, our agenda for today, I have to tell you, I have currently 80 slides. way too many. And even with my 80 slides, really we're just touching the surface here. So I'm not even going to be able to get to how to format a research paper or those details. Someone was asking about databasing. We're not going to be able to get to more of the advanced um, questions that people might have about research. Although definitely whatever questions you do have, there are some very experienced people here, and there actually are some people here today with PhDs and who have done a lot of studies over the years. And so definitely ask your questions, because if I or Michelle can't answer it, there's probably someone who can and who can lead you to the right resource. So why are we here? That we're going to talk about that as our agenda. Why do some of you need convincing to make the shift? This presentation is really a motivational presentation, because there's a lot of people who just aren't sure if they want to make the shift from informal research to more formal and to publishing. Why is reporting your work important? What is guerrilla research? What must one do to compensate for lack of inner and outer resources? What did prominent parapsychologists have to say about you doing research when I polled them yesterday? Why should you consider publishing results no matter what the findings? What is more important than statistical significance, and how are publication requirements changing to reflect this new emphasis? What must you do before you get started on any study? Now, that is probably, if we were only going to talk about one thing here, I would want to talk about that. I'm not starting with that, but I definitely want to make sure that we get to that, because that's really the difference between what many of you and many of the group managers that we work with the Applied Precognition Project, and also other people involved in associative remote viewing and other types of remote viewing projects. That's really the difference between what is currently being done and what needs to happen, is just a few preparatory actions that would make all the difference in the world. So we'll get to that. Ethical considerations, where we'll talk about that. Hybrid projects, merging operational projects with research projects. I know a few things about that and how challenging that is. That's been the main type of research I've done, and so we'll just talk a little bit about that. If we get to it, I'd love to talk about experienced viewers as subjects, what every researcher needs to know. I've been wanting to put on a presentation for parapsychologists about how to work with experienced remote viewers, because many of them don't seem to understand that there's a difference between working with experienced remote viewers and subjects that just walk in off the street, or college students that are volunteering for a couple of hours so that spontaneous acts of psychic abilities can be studied. There's a big difference there. I've also been a subject in several research studies now, so I have a lot to say on the subject, as I'm sure anyone else who's been in a subject as a study has to say. It's a fantastic experience. You learn so much, but it's also a real eye-opener too. And then resources for guerrilla researchers. All right. Why are we here? I can tell you why I'm here. I'm here because of Lorraine Connon. And this is a little snippet of one of her remote viewing sessions. And I'm going to show several sessions right now, because I think it's really important for us to always be reminded of what's most important when we discuss remote viewing, which is the sessions. So she had the comment pressured and intense motion. And yet when you look at the photograph, you see a an airplane in the same angle that she has her sketch in. But from looking at the photo, you don't see the pressure and motion. So one of the things I would like to know that many of us have opinions on, I've got my own opinions, but how much research has been done to let us know about, does a viewer actually go to a location? Does a part of them separate and go? What's involved in that? That I want to know more about that. And the best people to teach us about these things are those who are already experiencing this. Here's another session from Lorraine. And some of these I just pulled from the Applied Precognition Project webpage. I'm also here because of Shane Ivey. And this is rather interesting. It's a great depiction, very simple. And one of the things that I want to understand here is, look how he got the shape of the lamp, the square, and the inside, and yet he reversed it, which remote viewers so often do. So I want to know more about that. I want to know more about why we sometimes reverse the images and do things backwards. And there has been some research. With all of this, there's been a little bit of investigation, particularly a few decades ago, but you won't find anything published that are explaining these intricacies of why these things happen and how we could rectify them if we even need to. Also, I want to know why Shane remote viewed for 9 years before his remote viewing was ever posted online. Why didn't anyone care enough to do that? When we posted it on the Applied Precognition website, which we just built in December, he was just so touched that we had shared this session. And I just think that that's so sad. That it's sad for him and it's sad for all of you that you're doing such cool things and yet they're really not getting out there far enough. Although, of course, there are some people here like Daz Smith who has committed tremendous time and effort to get this stuff out there. In fact, Daz has probably more so than just about anybody on this planet. So I'm here because of Eva Johnson, or I'm sorry, I think it's Jackson, who is here today. And Eva has been viewing for a while now, and she, I don't know if you could see her session here, but she actually got the word balloons. And so what I want to know is her session here. This was an associative remote viewing session, and it produced a nice hit, while about 8 others described the wrong target. So why is that? Why do some viewers sometimes displace and view a photo that is not the one they're supposed to be viewing? There's lots of speculation about that. We're trying to really understand that. And the good news is there's a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of ideas out there, but there needs to be more. And we'll learn, instead of having to reinvent the wheel, if we come together and publish, then we're going to be able to learn from each other and move on to other things and resolve some of the challenges of remote viewing.
Debbie, we
Yes.
have some questions here. The first one is from Daz. Do you have a theory on this?
I do have, as far as displacement, um, I would say right now it's probably out of the scope of what we're covering. I think that it's about what you're focused on. For example, right now, as I'm talking, there's at least a few people that are not focused on what I'm saying. Their attention is going to things in their house. It's going to other things other than what I'm intending their attention to go on. Maybe now it's moving back to me. So why did their attention go away from what maybe they really did want to focus on what I was saying, but their attention went away? So we need to understand, what is it that takes people's attention away? And we have a pretty good idea, but I'm starting to realize that this is something that people can improve on. And for years, I would argue with Marty Rosenblatt. I'd get really mad because we'd have these discussions about, well, protocols need to be tight, they need to be a certain way, and I still believe that. But his philosophy was, well, viewers can improve at this. And I realized after a while that wasn't just wishful thinking, that he was actually observing certain viewers getting better at that. And I'm observing the same thing. I'm observing it with myself as I make more and more of an attempt and learn how to focus my attention in a certain place and get there. And so there's different techniques a person can use to hone in on what they want to hone in on. And I'm starting to find more success. I had a lot of displacement myself for a long time. It's getting better. But that's something I think we could do easily a whole webinar on that subject, and I would love to do that. Okay, so I'm also here because of Robert McKeever, who did this nice session. It's a little small, but with the sailboats. And what I would say for his and for others, even understanding, investigating, well, why is it that we're doing this cool work and there's so few of us aware of this? Why are there so many people in society that don't even want to look at this stuff? Their eyes glaze over when we try to show them our sessions. How many of you go around to your families or other people when you have a great session and you're so proud of it and you're like, look what I did? And they're like, okay, that's nice. Leave me alone. Who cares? So many people are like that. So why do we care, but they don't? That's what I want to know. That's worthy of studying. There's so much to study. That's my point. Here's a nice session. Oops. From Michelle, our communication specialist here. And Michelle had just been viewing for a little bit when she did this beautiful rendition of these balloons here. Her words were: balloons floating lighter than air, neon, tubular, oval shape, hard rim, darting as if it's through bulldozing, foliage green, gathering joy, entertainment. And then she had this very nice, simple sketch of a balloon. And her session really, you guys should all be aware, especially those who are new. What I'm showing you are snippets from sessions. So there may be other parts in sessions that some data that wasn't correct, some things that you really couldn't tell. And also, there were hundreds of sessions I could choose from. What I chose for this presentation were the parts that I could show you visually, and that's why I chose these in particular. I'm here because of Chris George's. Look at that nice sketch compared to the vehicle on the surface there. Here's another session by Chris, high up in the sky tower-like, and his little sketch there is great. And let's see. Oh, go back here. And the nice thing about Chris is not only is he a viewer, like many of yourselves, he does multiple roles. So he's a co-founder of App. He's a longtime manager. We work together quite a bit. And right now we're doing a project where he's my manager and judge. And so something else I want to know is we're actually having some great successes even when my own sessions aren't that stellar, and yet he still is making the right call for associative remote viewing based on my sessions. So I really want to understand Well, the intuition of the researcher, the intuition of the judge or project manager, how does that enter into the whole process? Now, that's also been studied in various parapsychology work over the years, but there's a lot more to understand about that in terms of remote viewing. And I mean, that's really one reason why double blind conditions are suggested, because it's felt that the manager or the judge, if they know what the target is, that could influence the viewer. So and I believe it can. I believe it can sometimes lead to the subjective displacement of viewing the wrong target. But there's so much to explore here. So I'm here because of Daz Smith. And some of you may have seen this in the presentations that I've given at IRVA, but this was part of our project where we had 40, I'm forgetting how many, about 40 remote viewers describe a bacteriophage, a microscopic organism. And this was part from Daz's session that really blew away one of our bacteriophagologists, one of our raters, judges in the project, who studied Daz's session, and he personally cut out Daz's sketch here and emailed it, saying that this was the first time that he really believed in remote viewing or psychic abilities, because he saw Daz's session. And this was also from that same study. This was done by Paul Hennessy, who is no longer with us. He passed on. And it's kind of a bittersweet situation here that I feel comfortable posting this with his name. He definitely let me post all his session work, and Paul was a fantastic artist, which definitely seems to make a very big difference in remote viewing. For, I mean, just looking at any of his sketches he did, you almost kind of didn't care, how close they matched. They were just, everything he drew was so beautiful. But he was a very humble guy and very modest, and he didn't want his name up there. So this is the first time that I'm showing his name in connection with any of his sessions. And I know I've talked to his brother, and I know his brother would appreciate that. And then these are just a few of my sessions. I'm here because there's just too much to learn. There's just too much to do. There's questions no one seems to be asking these days except for those of us who are doing this work. So who better than to do it than us? We're here not to just see how this works, but how far we can take it. And I'll just talk about this session. I just did this a couple of weeks ago, and I liked it because it was, my words were silvery fish all piled up in a mound, still flopping. And so what I really want to know is, why is a noun sometimes correct in a session and other times it's a misleading AOL? How can we get consistent? So that we can feel confident when we say, yes, it's a silvery fish and it's still flopping, whereas other times that's just going to be analytical overlay and it's not going to be a fish at all, but something quite different. I want to understand why those errors happen, because I'd like to have sessions like this all the time. And I can tell you, I don't always have sessions like this all the time. None of us do. So who is asking these questions at this point in time? It's us. I'm also here because of Chris Smith and Paul Smith. So Paul Smith was the president of IRVA for many years, and he's still instrumental. In fact, the last I heard, Pam Coronado stepped down as the current IRVA president, and so Paul is the acting president at the moment. And for those of you who are new here, IRVA stands for the International Remote Viewing Association, a great resource for remote viewers, and particularly their conferences are really fantastic to go to if you want to learn about remote viewing and meet all the key players, or not all of them by any means, but several. And so he helped establish the Warcolier Research Award, of which I'm a two-time recipient. And what it did, I had already been doing some research before that, but I was part of a small group where we were working with microscopic organisms. And I could tell you I would not have continued because there were some challenges we encountered. And if it hadn't been for that award, winning that award, which in some ways, well, it was an honor, but it was also a ball and chain around my neck for about 3 years. But because I knew that when you're given an award, and it was a monetary award, it was $2,000, which we definitely exceeded our budget there by about, well, probably about $600. We went over budget. And but when someone gives you an award, it becomes a responsibility, and I think that's a great thing because it kept us going and it kept us completing our project. So I'm very thankful for the incentives that that award gave, and it also brought legitimacy to our project, which helped us to, I would just say, to get some help, the help we needed from other people, because at least when you say you've won an award, people know that there at least some other people believed in your project. So that's helpful. And I can tell you guys, for any of you that are interested in research, definitely apply when for their next year's award. I don't know when their conference is going to be. You can always get in touch with Paul Smith and ask him when they're going to start accepting applications, and look on their website. But they don't have a lot of applicants, and which is probably one reason why we were able to, Michelle and I were able to have our proposal win this year. There were, I think, about 5 other applicants this year, but the competition is not that tough. And if anybody needs some guidelines as far as what would help them to get their study accepted, they really seem to like studies that are kind of quantitative in nature, where there's repeated trials, where you'll be able to show that some statistical significance has occurred. And so studies like that are going to usually go further than other studies that may just be super fascinating and interesting. So I'd be happy to personally talk to anybody, if that's something that you want to do. I don't intend to submit this year, so I will be willing to help anyone and not be your competition. So
Excuse me, I have an announcement here from Nancy. IRVA's conference will be June 23rd to 26th, back in New Orleans. Smiley face.
wow, that's fantastic. We had a great
You
time.
heard it first here.
Okay, terrific. So they should have their announcement up fairly soon about the Warcolier Award for 2016. Okay, so thank you, Nancy. Nancy is one of the IRVA board members, and she is also our fearless leader of our Sublime research group. And we are Sublime, myself and Michelle and Marty Rosenblatt and Nancy and her husband and Dave Silverstein and Chris Georges. We have been, and Dale Graff. We are all working together on an ARV dream study where once a week. Oh my gosh. And you know what, Nancy? I am so sorry. I was up almost all night long and I did not submit my dream target last night. I just realized that.
You didn't have to. She's unmuted.
I didn't
You
even,
didn't have
what's that?
Nancy, you're unmuted.
So do you want me to say something?
Yes, we do.
I'm not sure what you're looking for, but Deborah, that we weren't going to do a Sweet Dreams this weekend. We'll pick it up and start next week. But we have two projects. We've got the Alla Lively project and the Sweet Dreams project, and that Sweet Dreams project is amazingly rich and full. It's really exciting.
Yes, we're actually once a week dreaming a feedback photo that we're using for associative remote viewing. And while Dale Graff has been doing studies like this for quite a while, where he will task himself with seeing a future photo, um, and a woman he worked with, Patricia. I forgot what her last name is, but they did a study that spanned over 10 years in this. So they've done a lot of work, and then based on that, we came up with the idea of using that process for associative remote viewing, and so that's our current research project, and it's really opening up a whole new world for me. And I've started having some of my students practice with dreaming future feedback photos, and it's amazing how people are able to do that in just sometimes the very first week and a lot of times by the second or third week. And it's producing a lot of extra precognitive dreams as well that I'm noticing with myself and some other people. So, getting back to Chris Smith, some of you have heard about a study that he did, and I was trying to upload it as the system lets me upload documents, and apparently it's not letting me upload it. But if you research Chris Smith Journal of Scientific Exploration, he conducted a study at the University of Colorado where it was just for a class, and about 10 students, I think it was, in the class did associative remote viewing trials using remote viewing to make a future prediction. This was for the stock market. They did 7 trials. They were all successful, and they state how I don't remember how much money was made. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because they conducted 7 trials, and then they published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. Now, let that sink in. How many, maybe we could hear from Nancy again. Our Sublime group has been working now together for about 4 years. Nancy, do you know how many trials we've done in the last 4 years?
I'm sorry, I'm not prepared, but it's well, at least one every single week. So multiply that times 52, 4 times 52, at least a couple hundred. But it's been more than that because we have 6 people. I mean, I don't know, it's an awful lot. And APP, then you multiply all of the groups that are feeding their results into APP. We've got an incredible amount of data now for 7 trials to just only 7 trials to be publishable. Oh my gosh, we've got to get moving and make our fingers do the typing and put the data in and get it published because there's so much more that makes it even more important, especially those of us that are working to reproduce Chris's on 7 trials. Well, I don't know how many we've had, but maybe 50 or 60 trials using his study between Mark Samuelson's group and Sublime. We're able to reproduce his. I think that's even more important because it's no longer just 7 trials, it's many trials. That's more importance for the purpose of this whole webinar today.
Yes, exactly. And I'll be speaking to all that in just a little bit here. And really, this is one of the reasons, because I was having talks with different people. One of the project managers that took Chris's study and emulated it for a year, and there were several of us as viewers participating in that. And in the end, he was on the borderline of statistical significance. I think with just one more session, it would have technically been considered statistically significant. And he had, I don't remember, I think about 45 trials or so. Michelle, is Mark here today?
No.
Um, but so when it was all done, I said, "Hey, Mark, when are you going to get it published?" And he indicated he had never really intended to publish it. And I gave him way too hard of a time because I was really surprised. I said, "But you're repeating a study that was published, and you just did this under extremely tight protocols and blind conditions. And why wouldn't you?" And he had some reasons that I'll go into in a little bit, which were quite interesting and surprising. And I then started to, but understandable. They were completely understandable, and I'll share those in just a bit. And I started to talk to other people who I knew were doing blind studies, double blind, which is definitely a mandate in scientific studies and in remote viewing research, and doing everything that they really needed to do, and yet they did not have intentions to be publishing. And so I realized, wait a second, something's going on here, and I'll describe what's going on in just a minute here. So many of you are already doing work and projects that are important to advancing the fields of RV and parapsychology. And just like I was saying here, these subject matters are highly relevant to the field, reflecting current interests, which is always something you have to justify when you're going to publish. Is this relevant and is this interesting? They're using at least single blind conditions. That's a given, and many times double blind. And even if they're not using double blind conditions, it's not hard to put that into place. I mean, it does take some doing. It requires, if you're going to have double blind conditions, you need to have, which is where the researcher or project manager or judge isn't aware of the targets, then they're going to need a partner. They're going to need somebody else to help directly communicate with viewers and assist with the project. For example, with the Orcalier project that Michelle and I are working on right now, I was the one to choose the targets. And so that means that for the duration of the project, I am not in any communication with the viewers, at least as far as this project. And even I think it was Diane, where we were at App Fest, the last applied precognition project, and she's one of our talented, experienced viewers, and she came up and just made some kind of comment about the project, and I kind of jumped up and said, "Oh, I can't talk to you about this." I'm sure I sounded rude in the moment, but so we've really had, I couldn't be doing this project as double blind if I didn't have Michelle or somebody else, but she's so incredibly organized and such a good communicator with the viewers, which two qualities which are very, very important in a project. So that's really helping. And then also we have Stuart here, who another important part of a study is that the targets are randomized. So yes, I chose the targets and for this current study, and I know that I know what the photos are. However, I do not know the order that they're being delivered to the viewers in. So we have 30 targets. I have no idea which week the the viewers are receiving the targets. And the only reason I'm able to do that is because I found somebody to help, and I found a very dependable, conscientious, experienced person in the form of Stuart, who is here today. And so I basically sent him the photos. I knew he didn't know who our viewers were, and he and Michelle had never met. And all of this took some planning and figuring out, so it took some extra time. But so now he used a random number generator, which I'll show you in a minute, is available to everybody. And then he decided which week each or which their biweekly trials that the viewers, when they would receive those. And I don't know what photos being sent to them, even though I'm the one that is the lead researcher here. And so these are the things we've had to work out. If I was not doing this as a study, but just maybe just wanted to see what would happen, or I was doing this like many people in associative remote viewing are doing it because, or doing these projects because they want to make money. But it's not just about making money for them. And that's the point here. Even if they say, well, we're creating a group and we want to see if we can make money from this work. If you talk to any person who is doing a remote viewing related project, they have multiple goals for doing those projects. And one of the goals is to improve and understand remote viewing. And if that's the case, then there's absolutely no reason to not do projects in a systematic manner under tight conditions so that you can learn the most, so that you can rule out other factors. There's really nobody doing this where the only reason is for money and they don't care about the learning part. Okay, so um, in these projects today, the level of experience, you saw some of those sessions, and some of those sessions weren't even from very experienced people. We have so many people that have been trained in doing this for the past couple decades now. It's really mind-blowing how many talented viewers there are. And this is not widely known. It's not really widely known by the parapsychologists, those that have the highest amount of scientific training. And I know because I'm a member of just about every parapsychology related organization. I go to their conferences, I talk to them. There's a disconnect between the scientists who are most qualified to at least academically speaking, to study things. There's a disconnect between them and the people that are doing this in the real world and doing it well and understanding the intricacies, which is yourself. So part of my goal is to bring those two worlds together to be a connector point. Okay, so what? Why do we have to bring it to the next level? Well, we've already talked about it. If a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? So if you do a project and it doesn't get out there of what you're doing, and this is true of whether you get the results you wanted or not, it's still valuable to for others to know what you've been working on. There's something you can teach other people, even if it's just one tiny thing that then the next person doesn't have to repeat. If we have to keep repeating the same mistakes, then we can't ever move forward. We'll never do more than just one step. But even if everybody learned one little thing, it got disseminated, so then that one little thing was something that the other people didn't have to go through, we would be able to move forward. Because I don't know about you, but I'm a little tired at this point, although I still think it is so super cool and important. But I get tired when I hear the same stories about the military and SRI from years ago. Now, that being said, that is a foundation of knowledge that you have to have if you're going to launch from somewhere. And those who are brand new to remote viewing, go to Des Smith's site because he's got everything that's humanly available to learn about the past research and the past work that was done at SRI and within the military remote viewing programs, and all the incredible work done by Russell Targ and Harold Pudoff and Ed May and Ingo Swan. It's all there. But once you cover that groundwork, we need to launch from there. We need to go forward. And it's you guys who are here today or other people who may be listening to the recording in the future, it's up to you to carry things forward, and that can't happen if you're in the middle of nowhere not getting the work out. So the older researchers, or maybe they would prefer the word veteran researchers, think nothing is happening in the field of RV because they aren't hearing about it. So is that your fault or is it theirs? Well, I would say both. I would say both. But the good news is that some of these guys are coming to conferences, again, with the Applied Precognition Project. And I bring up that organization because it's really one of the most active remote viewing organizations. And some of these veteran researchers like Dean Radin, um, uh, just attended by webinar as a speaker this last year. And so there is Daryl Bem also participated in a webinar, and Jeffrey Mishlove was at our smaller conference just a few weeks ago in Las Vegas. And he's a longtime parapsychologist and has the television show that's on YouTube called Thinking Aloud. So there is starting to be a connection between these parapsychologists, which is very helpful. Okay, so publishing your projects will ensure its place in a historical record, so history repeats itself only as much as it is useful to those who are learning it. We don't want history to repeat itself if everyone keeps making mistakes and they're not learning. Publishing your oh, go ahead.
Debbie, about publishing, do you have a link or anything to the Collage project or anything that was, uh, any kind of public paper or article or anything? I know the Aperture has it.
Yes, yes, on my website, I do have the long paper. I have the abstract that was published in the Parapsychology Association convention paper, and I think up there now I do have the Aperture article. And in addition, we are attempting to submit the paper to a couple of publications like the Journal of Scientific Exploration. If anyone wants, they could just email me or go to my website, Deborah Katz, and look under my blog posts is where you should find that. Okay, so publishing will get the word out to those who can build on it and improve on it. So your work doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be thoughtful and inspiring so other people will want to build on it. It's a first step or just a piece in the entire uh, puzzle. And it will help you to do more and be more from the connections it can bring. When you publish, when you present your work, whether it's in an official scientific peer-reviewed journal or if it's in a less formal but just as important publication, such as Daz Smith, he is the editor of 8 Martinis, and we'll give him a chance to talk about that before we end today. I'm sure he'd be willing to do that and give a few tips about it. So we will, but when you get your work out, then other people who can help you further your work can get in touch with you. They know to get in touch with you. They could bring you insights. They can teach you things. They can invite you to places where you'll learn more. There's all sorts of opportunities that can come your way. And of course, for certain people in certain jobs or educational settings, publishing is a great thing to have on your resume. It never ever hurts. Research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. I like that quote. So why aren't more of us getting our research out there? And this is what I've come across when I've been talking to different people that, again, are doing double-blind projects, really great work with experienced remote viewers. but this is what they have been expressing. And I have to say, what has been most shocking to me is that some of the people that tell me these things are people that I know from our conversations, from some of their emails. These are brilliant people. These are people who, when I talk to them, I'm like, wow, they're so smart. I wish I could be that smart. And yet, when I started to talk to them about how it's really quite easy to do this work, they voiced all kinds of feelings of not being capable and not knowing where to start and not being worthy. So, very, very interesting. Who they are is not really matching up with the idea of what is really needed to get the workout. And it comes back to I loved hearing Nancy's response to her. She probably didn't know that they had Chris Smith again with the U of Colorado study, that he had only done 7 trials, because that puts it so much into perspective. It takes this big, huge thing, which, yes, I can tell you from our bacteriophage study, that took 4 years. We had 42 viewers. They did 2 in depth open response sessions on a microscopic organism. And then we had numerous scientists who didn't believe in these things judging our sessions. We were merging an operational project with a research project. I was pretty brand new to research. One of our co-researchers ended up in jail. The other one started his own business pretty much. Lance, he did a tremendous amount of work. But in the end, I had to kind of get the paper together. And that was tremendously stressful. That's a very different picture than let's do 7 trials involving some students who are new at this. A very different picture. And that's the thing I want to express here. John Kruth, he's the director of the Rhine Research Institute, and they're a really useful organization, helpful organization. They've been around forever. And they sometimes offer parapsychology classes. And I would suggest going to their website and doing one of the classes, because you'll get they'll go over research methods and how to lay out your presentation and your final paper. I was going to cover that. I was even going to cover, I invited John and John Palmer to come and speak on statistics. And when they looked at my agenda, that they've got a lot more teaching experience than I do, and they looked at my agenda and they said, there is no way you're going to have time for a discussion on statistics. So that's something that we might be able to offer and invite them back in a future webinar. But what John Kruth is always saying is that, you can take studies and do them. You can do them in a rigorous manner, but they could be called exploratory studies. So they're still worthy of publication, of getting the word out, but it's less demanding than if you have to show extreme statistical significance, and if you have to, do extremely in-depth studies. Which, yes, I'm not gonna try to sugarcoat it and say that research isn't sometimes completely time consuming, exhausting, mind boggling. It can be, but there's a whole range. And you can start off just with whatever you're doing, just amping it up a little bit and getting tighter with with how you're packaging it as a study. Okay, so getting back to what excuses did I find from people? Well, they said they don't know where to begin. They have no money. How can they do a study? How can they do research? They have no money. They don't have a PhD. They don't have a degree. Not part of the good old boys club. So feeling like, well, who's going to publish my research, or how could I do this? Because, I'm not an insider. I've heard people make statements that I've heard many people say this. Scientists don't know as much as those of us who do this work. Well, on the one hand, well, certainly scientists that haven't studied these subject matters is true. And I definitely believe that those who haven't remote viewed themselves, or who haven't spent a whole lot of time with other remote viewers, are not going to be aware of the intricacies involved. So if they don't know the intricacies, they don't know what questions really need to be asked. They don't necessarily know how to bring all of this to the next level. While they're trying to rack their brains to come up with a theory behind how psi works in the first place, so many of us are busy doing the work. And so I definitely understand that argument. However, there actually are quite a few parapsychologists who they themselves, maybe they're not spending every minute like some of us are doing psychic work currently. I mean, I calculated it for myself, and between my clairvoyant professional work, my remote viewing sessions, I'm actually literally in doing psychic work straight for 20 hours a week. Well, I say straight, I have breaks in between there, but that doesn't even include my 20 hours of teaching the related subjects or meditation, 20 hours straight of psychic work. So,
Debbie,
yes.
since you brought up psychic, we actually had a question earlier that asked if the research that you would do would be the same in psychics or psychic reading opposed to remote viewing.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
it's morning.
Um, yes, I would say that this what I'm talking about here will definitely um, apply to any psi related topics. The thing with remote viewing is um, it's a lot easier, I would say, to come up with studies around if we're going to differentiate other psychic work from remote viewing. I often do so. Um, One main thing is in the subject matter. Now, there's a lot of crossover, but in remote viewing, a lot of people will use remote viewing to describe photographs and to describe physical things. And it's a lot easier to analyze um, uh, remote viewing work involving, and we don't have to call it remote viewing. If a psychic is, um, let's say a psychic doesn't call themselves a remote viewer, they call themselves a psychic, but they describe a photograph. Well, it's really the same thing. Then it's just a case of using different words. But if you're talking about a clairvoyant who reads other people, which is again what I do in my professional work, and I know there's some of you who do that, it's a lot harder to document the work that we're doing with people. Now, it's certainly not impossible, and a study was done a few years ago on mediumship by Julie, I forget her name, if anyone knows what I'm talking about, but it was a mediumship study. They studied various mediums. They figured out how to quantify um, the work that the mediums were doing. They recorded their sessions. They asked the recipient to say how many times the medium was correct or not correct. It was a very in-depth study, and it took a tremendous amount of work. It was definitely very complicated. So yes, that can be done, but a lot of times it's going to be far more complex if you're talking about the subject matter being reading people. Okay, so um, getting back to the excuses that people come up with, they don't want scientific demands to interfere with the project. They don't want to disturb the viewers' participants. It's just too much trouble. They don't want to work that hard to go the extra step. No matter what they will find, or people will say, okay, well, no matter what, other researchers will find a way to tear it apart. So I won't even recognize it when I'm done. And then a big thing I came across here was people saying my results aren't impressive enough. But I think it really boils down to a lot of people feel like, well, what if we fail? Fear of failure translates as I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't know enough, I'm not a professional, I'm not educated enough, I don't have a degree, I don't have a right. Who the hell am I to do this research? Scientists are smarter than me. It all gets down to self-esteem. And beyond that, it's that I'm just not good enough and I'm not capable, and there's going to be problems and I don't want to fail. And I was so inclined to write the word failure. I was trying to see how big I could write the word failure because it made me laugh. And I like it when it makes me laugh because people take that word way too seriously. We really have to get over ourselves. And there's really nothing to fear but fear itself. In this case, I mean, I like to use the example where when it comes to these fears, like fear of public speaking, fear of doing research, fear of with my clairvoyant students reading other people, fear of doing a remote viewing session because someone might not like your session. When we're in that fear, it is so real. It paralyzes us, doesn't it? I mean, I say I like to laugh at it. I go through that as much as anybody. And then I saw that the movie Mount Everest, I think it's just called Everest, a couple weeks ago, with these guys climbing to the top of this mountain in sub-zero weather, that half of them were freezing to death and getting caught in avalanches. And, here we're in our little houses, typing at our computers, closing our eyes, doing this mental work, like going into complete, having heart palpitations, while these guys are actually physically risking themselves. Do you think that for a second they're not completely terrified out of their minds? That they are, that they're not only in pain but are not even in fear, they're actually in physical pain and discomfort. But what are they doing? Are they like cowering in their houses? No, they're out there pursuing their dreams. So that's how we need to look at the work that we're doing here, whether we're talking about research or just pushing ourselves with past our limits with our psychic work and continuing forward. Perfectionism, that's another side of fear of failure. It's very directly related, actually. In research, you don't have to be perfect. You have to be careful and thoughtful, and you do have to justify everything you do. There's a million decisions to work out. That there really are. And just when you think you've got them all made, you discover something else, you learn something new, something comes to your attention, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't think of this. Or now I have to rethink this. And the scary thing, especially when you're designing a project before you get started, is that once you really start, you can't change some of the things because it would then mess everything up. So it is scary at first before you start your study, making sure you get everything in place. But that's why there are systems in place to help you. In fact, what again for our Sublime Dream ARV project that we talked about with Nancy here, we discovered that the Rhine Research Institute offers a design review. So anybody that has an idea for a study can submit it to them. Now, they did take a little longer than we would have preferred, but we pretty much went from having our idea to be ready to jump into our work immediately. And in all fairness, we were or truthfulness, we're people that just like to get going really fast, and we could have been more patient, um, but we just wanted to get started. But my point here is that give them a little time, submit your work, and let them review your work before you do the study, because there's nothing like doing the study and then afterwards it goes through a peer review and you realize all the things you could have prevented if you had just gotten some professional advice. The advice is out there. And in fact, that's what I did with, I didn't do it with the Rhine because I didn't know they offered that service. But for this year's War Collier Award, I wrote the proposal and I sent it over to Ed May. Now, if any of you know Ed May, sending him anything and asking him for his opinion is really a scary process. I would have almost rather had to climb up a high mountain, but I sent it to him and he was very nice and he actually had some very helpful critique, and that was partially what I believe helped me get it in shape so that it could eventually win the award. So whoever you could think of to send your proposal to, if you have an idea for a project, you want to write it up into a proposal. Now there's formal proposal templates, and anyone, I won't have time to go over that today, but always feel free to email me and I can put you in the right direction of an official professional template that you could be sure will get your work in good order. But even if all you do is take your idea and write it down in an outline spanning a page or two, you can always take that and submit it to somebody just to get some initial impressions. And they may come back and say, well, you need to think this through a little bit. You need to research this a little bit more, and then you can develop it. The other point I really wanted to make here, because one of the things I found was that people were expressing that they weren't writers. For me, I've been writing for a long time. That happens to be one of my strong points. Math and statistics are not one of my strong points, but writing is. And so I thought that that was something that was easy for everyone. So when these really smart people who can do all sorts of things that I can't do express that they wouldn't even know or ever be able to write up a study, I said, well, why don't you just ask me? I would love to write up your study. I know Teresa Findley, she's a published author, a remote viewer, she runs the ARV for Fun site. I call on her to proofread things for me, and she helped co-write up our bacteriophage study that got published in Aperture, because after working on the project for 3 years, I was too close to it. I was burnt out on that. I wanted to just move on, and so she helped me with that. So making use of others in the community is just so incredibly helpful. Okay, so um, as far as making mistakes, it's okay if you make a mistake in a study. It's just you have to be the first one to discover it. If you discover you made a mistake, you made a bad choice, or something went wrong, then in your write up of the study, your discussion study of the discussion section of your paper, there's a place in there when after you report your results, you always want to discuss your results. And that I love that section. When I'm writing a paper, I can't wait to get to that section, because that section is going to talk about what went right, what went wrong, what was learned. That's the part I care about. I didn't set out to do research because I want to have to deal with statistics. I hate having to deal with statistics, but like many of you, I want to get to the good stuff of why are we doing this? What's important here? And as I'm going to show you a little bit later, and I'm going to try to move things along because we're already at our hour and 20-minute mark and we're going for 2 hours here, but still a lot more to cover. But there's something called effect size, and this is starting to be considered in the behavioral sciences as important as statistical significance. And this is where you get to discuss in your discussion section of your paper the effect size, what went on in your study, and how big of an effect was there. And this is where you get to put, getting back to perfectionism and not having to do everything correctly. This is where you get to say, hey, we did this and it wasn't the best choice. If we were going to do this again, we would not repeat this mistake. or we're really glad that we did this. Okay, so what I did yesterday was I took a poll. I created a survey using a program, online survey builder program that's really easy to use, and they have a free version. The paid version, I think I'm paying about $20 a month, and it has some really nice features. There's these great survey programs. So let's say that you want to get involved in research, but you don't really feel like you can do the kind where you're carrying out trials and things like that. But maybe there's things you want to know. For example, Daz asked before about my theory around displacement, and I'm sure he has some theories. I'm sure he has a lot to say about that subject. Well, we could poll people. We could, how big of a problem is it? Is it as big a problem as a lot of people seem to say they are, think it is? Is it not? How many people think you can get over the issue of displacement? What ideas do people have? Well, one way to learn about that would be to create a survey, and you could ask a bunch of people, and then you decide who you want to ask. Do you want to ask the entire population of the human race? Well, no, because most people haven't even barely begin to look into these subjects, so they're not really the ones to ask. But anyone who does remote viewing, even anyone who does psychic work, for those of you that are psychic and trying to understand what we mean by displacement. If you read a person and you want to tune into, are they going to get the next job? But then instead you start to talk about their next relationship. In a way, that's displacement, because all displacement means is that you intended to address one subject and you start to address another. In that example, that's not such a big deal. But let's say you're going to read a person and instead they came with their spouse to your office, and you start to talk about their spouse, but you think you're talking about them. Well, that's a problem, because now your information is correct. You're describing the wrong subject. So a lot of these things that translate with or have to do with remote viewing pictures definitely translate to reading people and doing other types of psychic work. But so getting back to this idea of a survey, you can do simple studies where that would be one topic that you could address in a survey. And so you could address psychics, you could address remote viewers, you could choose, well, am I addressing just any level of experience? Or like in my case yesterday, I wanted to just talk to parapsychologists, and not any parapsychologists. I wanted to talk to the top ones that are editors of journals. They founded their own journals. They've been running research institutes. I wanted to talk to them because they're at the other end of the spectrum of some of you who are here today just starting out. And I wanted to know what they thought, which I'll get to here in just a minute. Well, it looks like we're here right now. So I wanted to know what they thought about, should only PhDs, people with PhDs or advanced degrees, be involved in research, or is it for anyone? And I'm happy to say now, as of right now, I got 7 responses. And I did ask people, I told them, this is a last minute thing. I need your responses right away. Well, I did get their responses, and from 7 people at least, and I'm hoping to get more. There's quite a few prominent parapsychologists out there, so I'm hoping to get some more responses, and then I'll share that at a future date. But so far, all 7 unanimously agreed that everyone should be involved as long as they meet the requirements of publication. Now, they were responding to a multiple choice, so I had set up that statement. So I had put in, everyone should be involved as long as they meet the requirements of publication. Do you agree or not? And they all agreed to that. One said that they should meet requirements that may even exceed publication. So they what matters most to parapsychologists, and for those of you who are new to this field, parapsychology is the study of psychic related phenomenon, anything having to do with psi. And it's a very broad field. It can cover anything from remote viewing to telepathy to psychokinesis has oftentimes been studied. I'll give you some resources later about good things to look into if you want to learn more about it. But the bottom line is that they all agreed everyone can be involved and should be involved as long as they adhere scientific scientific and quality standards. They don't want people, there is too much at stake in the field. There's been so much misunderstanding from other scientific disciplines, and the field of parapsychology has had a rough go of it for throughout the existence of mankind pretty much. And so they just want people who are to really educate themselves. And that was a point that Dean Radin made. Some of the parapsychologists didn't want their names revealed, but some did, and those who did, I will. And Dean Radin said, and this is something Ed May says all the time. In fact, both of them, I write to them occasionally with these last minute urgent questions saying, please help me out here. And a lot of their comments involve, well, why don't you read this, or have you read this? And sometimes I have to admit I haven't. Sometimes I learn about those things because they say that. And I think one of the things, sometimes I think with the parapsychologists that I talk to, they may get a little frustrated because it's like, okay, have you really read everything? But and sometimes I'm like, no, I could have done more homework maybe before bothering you. But the disadvantage that all of us have here, unless those of you who are currently in some kind of university program, the disadvantage we have is that we don't have a, uh, a PhD committee. We don't have professors who are being paid because they have to help us out, where they have office hours and we can go talk to them, or we can walk up to the front of class and talk to them. We don't have those people. So, but we do have these parapsychologists. We do have these remote viewers. We do have so many people out there we could talk to. Of course, we have each other, and there's everybody here. I know, I'm quite sure just about everybody, I'll say it would be more than willing to answer questions from everybody else here. I have no doubt.
Debbie,
Yes.
there, just got a comment from Linda.
Uh-huh.
She said, as an editor and document production specialist at ULM, Assistant for Student Support Services, I offer my services as an extra pair of eyes to look over proposals or papers. So we already have people, you know, we're already right now in this moment creating a support system.
Yes, that's fantastic. And Michelle, when we're done with this webinar, let's figure out a way where people can get each other's contact information. I do highly
Okay.
recommend. I know a lot of you already are on the what I call the large Facebook group. If you just go to Facebook, enter in remote viewing groups, you'll see one group that has now almost 5,000 people. It's almost doubled in the past year or so. And Linda's oftentimes has wonderful posts on there, so you can get in touch with her. You could find Daz through there. You can find almost all these people I'm talking about, including some of these parapsychologists. Not all, but some you can find on there as well. But thank you, Linda, for that. So we have to use each other as resources. And one of the participants, so two points I was making here. One is there's a lot of research to read. There's a lot to read to educate yourself. And so the parapsychologists, they didn't get PhDs just by paying a lot of money to go to impressive universities, which, some of them did, Stanford and Princeton and Harvard and things like that. They had some pretty good resources there. But they didn't just like wake up and get a PhD. They worked their butts off, and they studied hard. And I mean, can you imagine? I have no idea how Dean Radin, he has all these books, he's published hundreds of articles. I have no idea how a human being can do what he does. I just can't even fathom it. But these guys have worked hard, and they've read. So they want you to educate yourselves, but then they're available to help. Now, some of them are more available than others. For example, Stephen Schwartz, who was a respondent in the survey yesterday, he said that you could get in touch with him anytime. And also James Spottiswoode. Some of you may recognize his name because he's been credited with coming up with the theory of sidereal time, which many remote viewers have heard about. He also repeated his study not too long ago and found that there really wasn't much of an effect. So he kind of reversed his idea that sidereal time has an impact on remote viewers, which is a little, I don't know, for some reason in a sick sort of way, it's funny with no insult to him. James Spottiswoode is the most sweetest guy. Worked recently on a project with him that inspired me so much. He's an incredible researcher, and you should read his work. But for years, I said, there's other things that researchers aren't looking at, and that's what I want. I want them to not just everybody looks at sidereal time. Well, what about the factors that to me have to make more of a difference? What's happening for you guys when you're doing your sessions and your kids burst into your room, the phone is ringing, you've just had an argument with your spouse? How does that impact your sessions? How does getting doing your sessions when you're really tired, what impact does that have? Some people think they do better remote viewing when they're really tired. I know I don't. I'm quite sure I don't. But have I done a study on it? I'm saying I'm quite sure I don't. But that's all in my head. And how much is that worth if it's just in my head? I have an identical twin sister, and I recently got my rights for my 3 books back from my publisher, Llewellyn, in a lawsuit. That's a whole other story, but I sued them, represented myself, and won, and I got my rights back. And my sister and I started a small publishing company, and she's been my publisher, so she's been handling the finances. And the other day she said that she was going to pay herself back she reimburse herself for her expenses she had put out. And I was like, okay. And she's been telling me she's keeping track of the expenses. And I said, okay, well, just, send me the expense sheet so I know, how much you paid out and how much you brought in. And she said, well, I have it. And I said, okay, great, send it to me. And she's like, well, I can't really send it to you. I'm like, why not? And she said, well, because it's all in my head. I'm like, what do you mean it's in your head? She's like, yeah, I've been keeping track of, basically how much I've been spending. And so I just paid myself back, about $4,000. And I'm like, wait a second, what are you talking about? So, she's my twin sister. She's lent me money when I was down and out tons of times and never asked me to pay her back. So, I'm okay. But I'm like, you know what? If you don't write this down, other people would consider this embezzlement. So, my point here is, how does that translate to what we're doing in research? I just said I know that when I'm tired, my sessions are worse, but I haven't documented that on paper. And what about the other people that say when they're tired, they do better sessions? Well, is that true? Well, this is really important. Why is this important? Well, if we're trying to get our results up, if we're trying to get more accuracy and less mistakes, and particularly when we're making use of remote viewing for, say, associative remote viewing projects where we're using it for wagering, where people are actually wagering on our sessions, risking their money. Or for that point, what if we're assigned a missing person case? Our job is to help save somebody's life. We want to know that we can do the very best job. This is real use application of remote viewing. We want to do our best job. So as a project manager, I'm sure this is my case, or Nancy as an associative remote viewing manager, or say Daz Smith as a viewer himself who works on missing person cases, or if he's hiring other viewers to work for him, we want to know, should our viewers do sessions when they're tired? What impact does that have? Can I trust a viewer's session if they've been up all night? Can I trust a viewer if a viewer writes at the top of their session that they just had a fight with their husband? Is that going to make a difference or not? Maybe it'll make a difference for some viewers. Maybe it won't make a difference for others. But the bottom line is we all have these ideas. We have these ideas about why displacement happens, but have we proven any of it? Is any of this documented? Or like my sister, is this just in our heads? What value is that? It's it doesn't instill a lot of confidence. Okay, so just wanted to point out here, many respected scientists and success stories without PhDs, or even many scientists, are success stories, and they didn't have PhDs or even a formal education. And my writing is way too small here, but I got the idea to share this because Jeffrey Mishlove, he's got some great books out. The PK Man, fascinating book about Ted Owens, who was a man who supposedly could change the weather with the help of alien beings, and it was really very well documented. It sounds pretty nutty, but fascinating story. He studied the PK Man. Jeffrey Mishlove was originally at he just spent a tiny little time at SRI, so he's when he was just starting out as a parapsychology student, and he's the only person who actually holds a degree, the official title of a PhD in parapsychology. They psychology programs do not have PhDs in parapsychology anymore. He also has a great book called Psychic Development Systems, which I've been learning a lot from, even though it was written in the 80s and then it's been updated. Anyway, he responded to our study yesterday, and he pointed out that some of the very best parapsychologists, such as Charles Honorton, and I never pronounce his name right, Honorton. You definitely want to read any of his studies. I would just Google the name Honorton and read every single study that he has published, because you're going to get such a great education in parapsychology. So he didn't have a PhD. Stephen Schwartz, who's published over 130 studies, he doesn't have a PhD. Well, who else doesn't have one? John D. Rockefeller dropped out of high school. John Glenn, the astronaut, is a college dropout. I've never heard of such a thing, an astronaut being a college dropout. Steve Jobs, he dropped out of college after only 6 months. Henry Ford barely had a high school education, and Albert Einstein was a high school dropout. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I started to look this up. So that's pretty cool. Now, that being said, I am in no way saying that having a college education is not important. My son is 16 and he is going to college. That's important. I want him to do that. I actually have just applied for a PhD program myself, for various reasons. So I am in no way saying that a higher education, doesn't help. Of course it helps to have other people say, hey, read this, study this, let me answer your questions. One of the reasons I'm applying for a PhD program is because I'm getting a little tired of just having to beg everybody for help. I'd like to just be in a situation where people are right there, and they're being paid. They have to help me. They have no choice. And also where there is more funding. I've done research now for several years without basically any funding. In the same way before that, I did, I made films without any funding. And before that, I was a single mom without any funding. I've lived my life without any funding, and I can tell you it's possible to do that, to achieve your goals, to feel successful, to get a lot accomplished with very little money. It's possible to do that. Personally, I'm a little tired of doing that, and so I'm in the process of taking steps so I don't have to do that my whole life. But I am a representative here to say that if there is anything you're remotely interested in even trying to do, money does not matter. There's always a couple steps you can take towards it. I didn't go into this uh, discussion to promote any of my books, but my book, Freeing the Genie Within, if you are interested in that subject of achieving whatever you want with very little resources, uh, Freeing the Genie Within, Manifesting Creative Abundance and Success in Your Life, is available on Amazon and in all fine bookstores for your reading pleasure. All right. Um, let's just get to what's important here. Research is a team approach. We've talked about it. There is no shortage of people out there who are interested in research and want to help you. As long as you have a solid idea and you're committed to doing quality work. Nobody wants to work for somebody that's being sloppy in their protocols, that's not using blind protocols, that has no background in this work. If you are brand new to this field, definitely if you've never done remote viewing before, but you want to research it, you just need to get educated. And again, we're not really here to plug the Applied Precognition Project, but that is a great place where you can get started working with different groups and managers and getting to put practice into place. Again, Daz Smith, who's here, he has invaluable resources. He has a website where you can do target practice. There's a lot of free resources out there for people. The Fireside Institute, Courtney Brown, he's got all his training materials. Ed Riordan, which you can find these links from Daz's website. He's got training videos. There's all sorts of paid training you can do there. You get yourself educated, and then by all means, people that are more experienced are going to be willing to participate in what you want to do. Celebrate that we live in a technical revolution. Again, the online survey products, they'll create beautiful surveys for you, and everyone will be like, wow, this person looks so professional, not realizing that it took all of 5 minutes to teach yourself how to use the program. In less than 24 hours, I got responses from Ed May, Dean Radin, James Spottiswoode, Jeffrey Mishlove, Richard Knowles, John Kruth, and Stephen Schwartz. Other technology available: random target number generator, dung beetle rating sheet by Alexis Poquiz that helps rate sessions. There's all sorts of file sharing programs, easy ways for group communication. Just like we're talking here, this technology, we're in a technological revolution. We're in the middle of it. We're getting to experience history in the making, and we can make use of it in our research. Now, I want to just get into the subject. We don't have too much more time here. But a lot of people don't want to report results unless they are highly impressive. Now, that's what some people have been telling me. Not only are they going for statistical significance slightly above chance, they're saying, well, I don't want to report this until I have 90%, 80% accuracy. And you know what? I used to feel that way too, because again, going back to those remote viewing sessions I showed you at the beginning of this, we know how good remote viewing can be. Even if all you've done here, even if you're brand new and you haven't seen a whole lot of other people's sessions, if you've sat in your room and tried to tune into a book or a newspaper, or maybe done one of the practice practice targets on Daz's site or Lynn Buchanan's site or David Morehouse's site. They all have practice targets. Maybe all you've done is sit in your room, did a single practice target, and saw that you had a match to that photo, and or maybe you had a dream about something that's going to happen tomorrow, or somebody said something and they said exactly what you were thinking. So you know that this stuff is real. Whatever. So you know how impressive these results can be. And there are a lot of people that say because of that, they don't want to report their results. They want to keep doing trials, want more and more trials until they finally get the results up there. And then they will reveal their impressive work to society. Well, I have a few things to say about that. Um, We asked prominent parapsychologists what they thought of that. I asked, are you more personally inclined to submit a study that has less impressive results than one that doesn't? Well, 3 indicated they always submit and felt others always should as well. 3 indicated they may be less inclined, but still often submit. And the inclination has more to do with enthusiasm level than trying to hide anything. But here's the thing, even in this case, we're just talking about, are they submitting with statistical significance? So 3 people said even if it didn't reach that bar, they would still submit. They'll submit. 3 indicated that if they do a study, if they plan to do a study, they will see it through and they will submit it. Now, one helpful thing to do is there are science research registries, and you can submit your proposal and your plan to them, and then that will keep you sticking to your plan, and then you report your results. And so it's not ever guaranteed anyone will publish, but so 3 said that they will at least submit. 3 indicated they may be a little less inclined if it looks like there's no effect and their hypothesis hasn't been proven. But when I said, okay, in an RV study, what would you do if less than half the trials were hits, so significance wasn't established, but then those that were hits were stellar? And by hits, I mean where it was it was determined, yes, this corresponds with the photo, or yes, it was apparent that these trials were successful. There's different ways for that, and we're not going to have time to discuss that, unfortunately. But really, what I wanted to know was, what if you had some sessions in your study that were really impressive and some interesting things going on in your study, but you just didn't reach statistical significance? What would you do? And they all said they would submit for publication. So some people might say, well, what's the difference from what you just said with the other slide? Well, the difference here is, let's say there were no really impressive results at all. Half of them, even with no impressive results whatsoever, would still submit. All of them said if there were some interesting or stellar sessions, they all would submit. So how does this apply to those of you who have done managed work already with hundreds of trials, where there, of course, as a fellow remote viewer, as one of the remote viewers maybe in your studies, or having witnessed them as a webmaster posting them, of course you've had incredible sessions. I have no doubt that if you've been using viewers, at least some experienced ones, that if you have been doing repeated trials, you've had some very interesting effects. Well, these same researchers say that they would submit for publication. However, the difference is that they intended to publish in the first place. So they would have done some things that some of you have not. And so I want to, in our remaining minutes here, I do want to get to that. What do you need to do beforehand, which will change your study from just informal to formal? And before I get to that, I'm really going to skip over some of these slides now. I do want to say that the mere fact that a bunch of people are coming together to do this work, that maybe a lot of people in the mainstream, well, that definitely a lot of people in what we would call mainstream society are not doing, that is interesting. It's important and it's part of history, and social scientists would be interested. Even if we were totally out of our minds, we were totally self deluded. I mean, look at how much study has been done into cults, um, into all sorts of wacky groups that are doing wacky behavior. This is a little bit wacky, even though it's real. I go in my room, I close the door, I close my eyes, I do all this stuff in my head, and then I write things down on paper. There's paper all over my office, and then I go around and track my family members down and make them look at my sessions. Is that not strange and interesting behavior worthy of study, especially when you say that there's at least 30 people here doing the same thing? That's interesting no matter what our results. Don't underestimate that. But people won't know about it. They don't know what's involved in all of this. And in fact, if people really knew what we're doing and thinking about on a minute to minute basis, hour after hour after hour, if they knew that, they would not accuse us of being frauds or of being fakes. They might still say we were deluded or insane, but they wouldn't say we were fakes if they knew of every waking moment being spent on this work. Okay, those conducting meta-analysis and studying effect size need your data. Otherwise, they won't have a large enough sample size to draw adequate conclusions. Meta-analysis is when a researcher takes all the other studies, all the data from those studies, and puts it together. And I love this slide from the book Effect Size Matters. Effect Size Matters is a book that Dean Radin recommended. It's a short book. It costs $15 online. It's about 50 pages long, and it talks about why statistical significance is not everything, that effect size is important. And so that book is really a very, very helpful book. And I would say Ellis is the author, and you should read, if you want to understand statistics better and effect size, then read all of his books. They're written in very easy to understand language. I really appreciated it. So this is a slide, and he said effect size matters. This slide is an elephant. This picture is of an elephant with blind men, and many of you have heard the analogy, a story about a bunch of blind men feeling an elephant. They each feel a different part. One feels the trunk, which is long and thick. The other feels a little tail. The other feels the body of the elephant. And if they don't talk to each other and share their observations, they all have a completely different idea about what the elephant is like. Now, Ellis didn't mean to have this analogy apply to parapsychology, but my gosh, it just occurred to me, and this is a side note here, apart from research. You have people that are mediums. You have people that are trained clairvoyants. You have people that are doing healing work. You have untrained psychics, trained psychics. And then you have the remote viewers. You have the military remote viewers who won't even say what they're doing is psychic, so it's confusing everyone because, of course, what they're doing is being psychic. They just don't want to use that word. But many of them I shouldn't say many of them, there's not that many of them, but the military remote viewers I know would never even try to do a mediumship reading. You won't hear the word chakra or aura or crystal or aromatherapy come out of their mouth. So we're all doing these different things, including the parapsychologists who are studying this stuff. We're all studying the same thing, but different parts. And even within the field of remote viewing, even with the training methodologies, if you do controlled remote viewing, you are getting different effects than if you only do extended remote viewing, or if you haven't been trained at all, you're going to have different effects. You're going to have different results. You're going to have different experiences. And if you don't realize that what you're doing is leading you to have different experiences, maybe just as effective, we don't know, because no one's done official studies on which trainings produce different results. I know all these trainings can help. I'm a proponent of all these trainings. I teach elements from every training in my own remote viewing courses. I've seen firsthand, but have I documented it? Has anybody in the last 20 years documented what effects work the most? No. These are areas that need to be studied. You guys could be studying them. Somebody has to. That's one reason why I want to go get a PhD, because I know that there's a lot here, and I'm going to need some money to do this. But I would prefer if you guys did it, so I didn't have to be honest. I've got other things to do. But getting back to he says the elephant is the effect and what is being studied. The researchers are the blind men making inadequate assessments based on the part. This is why meta-analysis is so important. So it takes all the different studies, all the work that some of you have been doing that you thought was not very significant, that you thought, well, yeah, I'm at 60%, but why report it till I'm at 90%? Well, you are taking away, you are denying the data that other people like Dean Radin could easily take your results if you do a few important steps to get your studies into shape. He could take it, put it into his meta-analysis, and have a much more accurate depiction of some of these things. And by the way, you guys should all read Dean Radin's books, because they're all about an overview of all the different things going on in parapsychology, because he's focused so much on meta-analysis. Jessica Utz did a meta-analysis of or not all of it, but a good amount of work at SRI in the 70s. This didn't include the operational work that was done in the military unit, but it did include the work that was done in the research unit. So that was a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is a big deal these days in research. And in behavioral science research, it's very important. Effect size, in fact, is a requirement and is even starting to be looked at as more important than statistical significance in some behavioral science and psychology magazines. Okay. I am going to have to go about 10 minutes extra to get to my point, so I hope you guys can stick with me. If not, the recording will be available. Anyone who is still arguing that psi has not been shown to exist is not worth talking to. You all are the next generation. Please do not get stuck at the proof of principle threshold. Be brave, be bold, go through the door and see where the path leads. That's a comment from Stephen Schwartz, and he said that yesterday when I surveyed him. And there's something I really like about the idea that he has so many books, and you should definitely check out his website. He's very active with the Parapsychology Association. In fact, if you write to them many times, he's the one deemed with the responsibility of responding. He's very knowledgeable. Definitely, read his work. But there's just something satisfying about this. Was a message from him to you guys. These parapsychologists responded for one reason only to my survey. They responded because they knew that you were going to be here today. They didn't have time to come themselves, but they were confident that if they responded to the survey, that their comments would find their way to you. You are the next generation of researchers, and they want you to come up to where they are. And you are not just going to come up to where they are, but you're going to
supersede them, I'm sure. Survey results on publishing. Another quote from Schwartz: my experience having published something like 130 papers, 20 book chapters, and 5 books is that publishers are interested in things that give real insight. I think it would be a great shame if the new generation of RV explorers were still stuck at the proof of principle threshold. I think that was a little different from the one I read before. Jean Glass: statistical significance is the least interesting thing about the results. You should describe the results in terms of measures of magnitude, not just does a treatment affect people, but how much does it affect them? And in the book, Effect Size Matters, which again you can find online, by Paul Ellis: whether you test hypothesis or not, whether you crunch data or don't, the main thing is to move towards a better understanding of the world of effects. So in remote viewing, again, what effect does sleep deprivation have on your sessions? What effect does being in the dark have on your sessions? What effect does doing your sessions in a cluttered room? What effect does studying controlled remote viewing have? What effect does having controlled room what effect does taking a class from Deborah Lynn Katz have on you versus from Daz Smith versus from Michelle Bolgatz versus from Joe McMonagle? What effect do these have? We don't know. And the point in all of this, even in bringing up, what program can produce better results, what teacher can produce better results. It's not because we want to be competitive and be able to say, oh, my training produced better results than your training, which actually could produce financial benefits. Yes, so those are real world benefits. But what we would do is we would learn how can we raise up other remote viewers from this? If we know that one training is producing better results, maybe because the teacher themselves is extremely psychic, or because another teacher is not psychic, but is more can see things from a more balanced viewpoint. If we could know that, then we could raise everybody's skill level up. And if we raise everyone's skill level up, then that could change the course of all of mankind. Okay, just a side note here, which should not be a side note. If you're considering research, you have got to consider ethical considerations. John Kruth, the director of the Rhine Institute, wrote in his survey, ethical considerations are essential to every study and must be followed. Every time I talk to him, he mentions that, and he would be very disappointed if I didn't direct you to a couple of resources. The Parapsychology Association, on their website, if you look on their website under publications, they have a document that has been put together about ethical considerations for parapsychologists. Please go and read that before you even embark on using others for a study. You want to understand ethics. There's plenty of information on the web. If you've gone through a parapsychology, or if you've gone through a psychology class, social science class in an undergraduate program, there's always an ethics class. If you haven't, you might have a little catching up to do on the subject, but just Google ethics. But definitely look at ethics in social science, and particularly in parapsychology. I could do a whole class in that, and I actually do have a lot to say because I do have some ideas that are different from traditional parapsychologists. For example, parapsychology has always felt that the subjects, their identities should not be revealed. While I completely subscribe to confidentiality, I know that it means a lot to remote viewers. for their work to be out there and to be given credit. And we're not going to have time to really talk about operational projects merged with research projects. That may be, of course, a subject for a whole other webinar. But that does bring up ethic considerations and considerations around confidentiality. So ethics are never clear cut. But just putting your attention on them and knowing that you want your participants to fully know what they're dealing with is very important. There's only one thing I want to bring up now, and then we'll move to our questions, because I know you guys have some questions that Michelle's been collecting. So this is the really important thing I probably should have started with. When I first started doing research, all I cared about was, I guess what you could say is the what would fall under the effect size ideas. How does one element affect another? I cared about the larger picture, the results. I thought, well, the statistics stuff, that's calculations you do at the end. I thought you did it at the end because when I learned about writing research papers, the statistics part is at the end of the paper. So I thought, well, you just do your research in the order. You start with the introduction, and then you do your methods, and then you do your analysis part where you figure everything out. So I naively thought that was how you would conduct a project. I could not have been more backwards and mixed up. And I have to tell you that the learning curve I went through, because I didn't realize that, was painful. It was painful because it was embarrassing. And boy, the one thing about scientists I have to say is that not all of them are warm and fuzzy. Just the opposite. If you are doing something stupid, they may not tell you you're being stupid, but every ounce of their being will project that you're being really stupid. So I had to endure that because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And again, as what I call a guerrilla researcher, I had to figure this stuff out on my own. So I'm hoping that you guys, I'm trying to spare some of you from making the same mistake. You need to determine upfront what you will do when your data has been collected. You need to have a justification for every single thing you're going to do. You may underestimate the importance of analysis because it's not as interesting as the subject matter under study. However, it's got to take center stage. How you're going to do your analysis is going to determine how you're going to carry everything out. So the statistical significance criteria should be clearly specified before a study begins. If the data does not meet these standards, the report should reflect this. So it's not that what you decide up front that you have to guarantee you meet it. It's just if you don't, you have to explain why. Both a descriptive and statistical hypothesis needs to be stated up front. What are you testing? What did you expect to happen? What's the null hypothesis? These have to be stated clearly. You have to determine your analysis plan because you need to know your sample size. If you do a whole study where you only have, let's say, 10 remote viewers do 10 single sessions, that may not be enough for what you're trying to prove. So you need to know your sample size. How many trials will you conduct? That's all part of it. How many viewers will you use and how many trials will each participate in? NRV, how will you score and rate and judge the sessions? What criteria will you use to choose the judges? Are you just going to pull anyone off the street? In our bacteriophage study, we had judges who were experts in microbiology. I wasn't qualified. I couldn't even pronounce the bacteriophage. I didn't even know what that was when we started. I wasn't the one to choose the subject matter. And even my Lance Beam, who's a 30-year biologist, he barely knew about specific organisms called bacteriophages. That's why he chose it. So his ideas wouldn't telepathically move to the viewers, because he didn't have that knowledge. But then how were we supposed to rate the sessions? Who was supposed to judge them? Well, we had experts do that. But you know what? The experts had never heard of remote viewing and didn't even believe in it. So we had a big conundrum on our hands. This was challenging. Fortunately, for many of your projects, especially if they're involving having viewers view photos, which a lot of people here do, and that's why I've really, used that as a subject of study. This is just remote viewing is a tiny part of parapsychology. Associative remote viewing is a tiny part. Having viewers describe photographs, that has been in the Gansfeld body of research in parapsychology, which has seen a lot of impressive results, or more impressive than other areas of parapsychology. They use photos. They didn't call it remote viewing, but they had subjects use their clairvoyance under certain conditions, using sensory deprivation to describe photos, and photos that senders and receivers were working with in other rooms. So photos have been a big part. But who's judging? Is it the psychic judging? Is it other judges? And all of that is going to make a big difference in your session. In fact, this is what's worthy of studying. What's worthy of studying is, what how does the experience level of the judge, how does the scoring of the sessions impact the overall project? How does it impact the viewers? How does it impact the final results? These are all things that many people are interested in knowing, and I'm giving you guys all ideas for future research. But anyway, getting back to this idea that these things have to be worked out up front. They have to be declared up front. And this is what is not being declared by some of the managers within the Applied Precognition Project. Not because they're trying to do anything wrong. They're not the ones saying they're doing research. I'm the one saying you guys need to do the research. So they're not declaring that. Again, they are using blind conditions. They are, many groups are using stable protocols, but they are not declaring we're going to do this many trials. Instead, they have a let's see approach. Because more planning is involved and they don't know if their viewers are going to want to continue on after 20 trials or so. In our Sublime ARV group, what Nancy has set up for us, and what we've decided is we'll do series of 10. We'll do a series of 10 and then decide we're going to do another series. This is still kind of sloppy in terms of if we're going to do an overall research project, which we are for our ARV Sublime Dream project we were talking about. For that, we've declared we're doing a year, once a week. We'll have at least 50 set trials, and then we're going to be done. So we have declared that up front. We haven't done that in some of our other work. And so that's what I'm trying to bring more people to declaring all of this. And as Nancy and Michelle, who was part of our design team for the Sublime ARV project, that we're almost at our 10th session now, so we're just still at the start. But as they saw, there was work we had to do. We came up with a whole proposal. We answered these questions. Nancy and I spent hours on the phone, but together on this. But the good news is it didn't take that long. From the time we had the idea, which was inspired by seeing Dale Graff at the IRVA conference in New Orleans, which again, as Nancy just said, it's going to be next year there as well. We got inspired by attending a conference. And from the time we got inspired to the time we put our project into action and actually had Dale Graff, who's an expert, who we couldn't believe when we asked him, do you want to be part of our project? you know what? We didn't ask him. We told him what we were doing. We asked him for advice, and he volunteered to join our project. And you know what? Joe McMonigal has volunteered to join another project when I asked him for some help, some research help. My point here is this, that experienced remote viewers want to help out. You guys can be doing this research. You guys can learn about these things through reading, through going to professional conferences. The information is there. You have to put yourselves in the right places. So what I'd really like to do now is say thank you guys for coming. I'll spare you my other 50 slides.
Muted. Unmuted.
Comments that you've been seeing. And Michelle, are you still with us?
Yeah.
Okay, please share the questions and comments. And if anyone wants to raise their hand and speak, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if Daz is still with us and still awake, because I went on for quite a while here. I would love to. Why don't you unmute Daz? Daz, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi there. Yeah, it was a very inspirational presentation, and I would like to see more projects and research being done. I wouldn't want to run one myself, mainly because I don't want to sound egotistical with this, but I feel my best placement within this type of thing is as a remote viewer rather than a person running a project, really. Yeah, so I'm all infused, really. I would like to see more work being done out there, because there isn't enough of it.
Yes, well, thank you. And you know that's a great point too, is that we all have something to contribute. I mean, my gosh, Daz, the amount of your contributions from your website and all the materials you put out there, even if you weren't one of the greatest remote viewers alive, you would have already made so many contributions. And then, of course, as a viewer, you guys don't know this necessarily, but Daz, participates in so many different kinds of projects for law enforcement, for research. And the point is, everybody here has some kind of contribution. This webinar was not intended to encourage everybody to become a researcher. It was only encouraging those who either currently are researchers but don't realize it, or who are interested in research. We all can play a part and make a contribution in some way. And there are more than ample opportunities for those of you who are viewers to participate in others' work. Would anyone else like to speak up? You're all unmuted.
Well, I just wanted to add something that you just said, that, and it's a good point that Daz brought up, is that every project needs viewers, needs judges. So I think the idea is just that we build up a huge support system, and everyone can figure out what they're best at. And we needed to, for one project, we needed to find 12 viewers that were committed to that many sessions. So if you're available for volunteering, or sometimes you do get paid, it's just creating this huge network with everybody.
Hello, are you there?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I started to learn remote viewing. My ex-husband was a professional remote viewer, David Lewis. I'm divorced now, but I've been having, you're talking about bacteriophages project, And I've had Morgellons, and I healed myself 98% from all the other pathogens. And I still have one crawling, vibrating underneath the skin of my abdomen. And it's the only thing left. I've healed all the sores. I healed everything except that particular one. So I would like to know if there's a project involved in that we can gather a few remote viewers to find out what is this last crawling, vibrating pathogen I still have and others have
Yeah.
underneath the skin.
Yes, thank you. That is something that would be a very interesting project that many remote viewers, there's what I would suggest, and I could see this done in a couple of different ways. One, for you personally, you could either have a remote viewer, which there are some professional remote viewers here. Um, I think Daz does sessions for. You could hire someone like Daz, Joe McMonigal, Lori Williams is a professional remote
They're
viewer.
excellent.
Yes.
They're excellent. They're excellent. But the problem is, my name is Miriam Mesa. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I'm out on a fixed income. This thing has taken thousands of dollars of alternative, conventional, all energy healing, Robert Bruce, the energy. I've done. So I've done pretty well.
What I would suggest, Miriam, is get in touch with me because I have clairvoyant students who can also look at this. And for people just like you, I have a practice group. My students get together and practice on people once a week. And it's totally free, and you can schedule an appointment with them. And they would absolutely love to look at that because they get to learn so much. I can't guarantee by any means that they'll have an answer for you, but they may very well do that. So get in touch with me, and I will get you. And you can get in touch with me at. Let me just show you on my screen here. And while I'm showing you, does anyone else have any questions?
I will send an email to follow up with this, with all the links to the books and Rhines and Irva, anything that mentioned, I will include in the email.
Yes. Does anybody else have any questions? And Michelle, did you see any questions or comments on your screen?
No, just everybody. Well, the people that spoke said they very much enjoyed the webinar.
All right then. Well, we don't need to keep everyone any longer. Thank you guys so much. I so appreciate all of you, and I just love you all. And we'll be in touch soon. Look forward to further webinars like this as well. And we definitely appreciate you being here. I'll say goodbye to everyone now, and the recording will be available on YouTube soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was just brilliant, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you for everything.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Deborah and Michelle.
You're welcome.